On behalf of Clackamas Community College and their LEAP office, which stands for Leadership, Education, and Advocacy for Progress, I want to welcome you to this discussion, exploring amplifying multitudes and flourishing in community for for today here with our Black community. I think that we have a special opportunity to just relax and enjoy the discussion. It's going to be a rich experience for all of us. I'm so grateful to have the support of our staff here at Clackamas Community College. So on the call with us today, we have Casey Layton, the Chief of Culture and Impact, and we have Tino Francesco Evans, who's the coordinator in the LEAP office. We also have Jenny Miller, who is the lead event coordinator, helping us with all of the tech that helps us run this beautiful Zoom facilitated discussion. And we also have interpreters joining us today in ASL. We are so grateful for them as well. So one of the ways that I access wellness personally myself is through language, and I'm going to bring us into this conversation by sharing a poem with you. Go ahead and take a moment to take a deep breath or gaze on something that makes you happy, and we will begin with this moment of wellness that means so much to me. The poem is called Dark Waters. An infinite black cave called me by name. Rashida Ashe, I see you. Rewriting the lyrics of my genetics, I met my match with blazing sun sparks on my back. I proceed, and as my ego began to retreat, heat crawled up through my feet where my heartbeat meets my secrets. Tears well up, tear duct flood. Everything I thought I knew raced right through, creating a pool of unidentified destiny that I had to swim through. Too strong a tide, but I swam in dark waters, uncharted scars, open wounds. I swam in dried blood bones marked where massacring machetes marred my mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers. I swam through violent vultures that picked the beautiful brown skins apart, abandoned in coal mines, on railroad tracks, where trains carried their dignity down rolling hills of greedy green, liquid moonstone, promised land streams. I swam through daisy daughters and sunflower sons, babes at the breast of a dark continent, nurtured by sweet life, love, blood only she can give. Only she can. I swam, and when my feet finally felt rocky bottom, eyes peaked light, lips parted open, soul peeled, my strength startled me. I moved up rock on my belly gracefully with an innate knowledge of the path, a faith in the mystery, a trust in the opening in front of me, a dedication to walk through and fill my shoes and speak our story of redemptive glory, reclaim the black birthright of humanity's beginning, where the Nile meets the land, where spirit and earth reached for each other's hand and agreed to make a man. The promised land is your womb, Black woman. And in the end, we all begin again. So I emerged, and the sun was right where I left it. And I am sure the whole world felt it when our eyes finally met. Peace-filled smiles cleared paths on our lips, knowing the ancestors meticulously planned this fine occurrence, this soul mating meeting of the tribes. In a hushed tone, grandmother says, "Wise one, walk on. The road is long, endless, but so are you, and blessed be the world that learned to breathe at your feet." So we embark with a pride that only straight truth brings. We take wings, sing the harmonies of reciprocity, meet our future, elongate the lineage, unwrap the whispers of broken backs. We are belting out our joyful noise. Thank you for joining me in that. I'm going to welcome our panelists to share their name, their pronouns, and a word or two to help us all kind of like reflect um, from their perspective about the piece that I just shared, whatever they're feeling. Welcome, Dewan.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Dewan Tanner, he, him pronouns. And Rashida, thank you for that. And in listening to you, what came to my mind is finding oneself and an identity is what I took from that. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Tasha.
Thank you so much, Rosita. That was powerful. I think that was one of the words that I would use. I am Tasha Bach, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. And another word that I would use would also be resilience and spirit.
Thank you, Tasha. Welcome, Ashi.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Rashida, for making me weep like a baby at 11 in the morning. I love that. I really appreciate that. And I feel like yeah, he, him pronouns and the word grief, respecting the respects that I receive from your words of grief and reverence. Yeah, really sing true to me. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, and you're welcome for making you cry this morning. It's my pleasure. Welcome, Violet.
Good morning, everyone. Rashida, that was awesome. For me, I'm Violet Larry. I use she, her pronouns. And the poem, I just kept saying, that's me. That's me. Myself, my family. Those are the words and what I immediately took from that.
Thank you, Violet. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you, Rashida. I'm Erica Bailey. I use she, her pronouns. I have to come up with some new words. I had some thoughts others have shared. I mean, the word ancestor just kept resonating until you said it. But then also, I think resonance, like I agree, it just echoes so much of my experience. So thank you, Rashida.
I love that. Thank all of you and welcome to this discussion. Thank you for coming and participating and sharing. And what you just said, Erica, kind of makes me think of the first question. We're going to jump into our discussion about what comes to mind. How do we experience cultural nourishment? What experiences have you had that fall under that umbrella? And we know that umbrella is large and it can mean lots of things. When I think of nourishment, I immediately can like smell my mom's kitchen. um, and so I invite you to share what comes to mind under that umbrella of cultural nourishment for you. Erica will start us off.
Thank you again, Rashida. When I think about cultural nourishment, I was reflecting on a time in the fall of 2020 when I was definitely sort of yearning for cultural nourishment and needing to look for that in virtual spaces. I had the opportunity to participate in an embodied gathering that was hosted by Resma Menicum. And we did some work during those sessions, but we were actually invited to form triads. 3 folks to work through his book, My Grandmother's Hands. And we were doing this in spaces with all Black bodies, as he refers to them. And so some of the things that we did, you do this sort of like somatic, like sharing and witnessing. So you would sort of talk about an experience that you've had, particularly with like white body supremacy, and you're being witnessed. And um, also, there's like an observer. So you're sort of sharing what was going on in your body as you were going through that experience. And then the witness is noticing what they see happening, both with your story and what you're experiencing as you're sharing. And then the observer sort of puts it all together. And just having that shared experience of sharing some of those stories in community with other folks during a time of pretty deep grief, both from, you know, the aftermath of George Floyd and COVID and all of that. I felt really honored and special to have the opportunity to connect with folks that I'd never met. These were two people that had been strangers to me prior to this time, and have such a deep moment of like witnessing and processing. And to me, that was incredibly nourishing.
Wow, what a rich experience. That's like I can feel myself having put myself in all the different roles that you just described. So I could only imagine what it would be like to be there. And I love that you specified white-bodied supremacy because the body has something to do with it. What about you, Ashi?
Yeah, thank you. Talking about cultural nourishment, um, and appreciating and sharing with other cultures, like having grown up on military bases, I always had like friends from different backgrounds, a lot of first generation and immigrant friends and stuff. So you know, first thing that comes to mind is with, you know, food. Like my mom always had like a Filipina auntie that we had lumpia in the freezer all the time, and you know, or I think about, you know, learning how to make adobo for the first time, or learning how to make like jong and lo bak go from like Chinese aunties, like all those things where it's like we're in each other's homes and kitchens, and getting to learn kind of the stories and not just the thing itself, but how we relate to the thing and how the information is translated and transferred to me through experiences that like resonate with my heart. And also like piggybacking a little bit off of Erica was like, that was really cool to hear about. And so, and I just had an experience last night where I facilitated a movement group with all like mostly like Asian queer femmes, um, in the room, and from different backgrounds, a lot of first generation. And we did a similar thing called authentic movement, where there was a mover and a witness. And so the person moving just is like just experiencing their body. And this is something anyone can do, right? Experiencing their body and moving and following maybe curiosity or exploration or what have you, with no prompt. And then the witness gets to just, you know, pay attention, and then there's a period of sharing and reflection after each person takes turns. And with, you know, drawing, you could draw, you could just share words, but that right there is like a really accessible thing that anyone can do to kind of begin to kind of, you know, access those mirror neurons and kind of feel into my own body as I witness somebody else in their experience. So, yeah, thank you.
Wow, I feel um, that is such a great reminder of shared experience. Like we're talking about amplifying multitudes, and both of you described so many positions and perspectives and embodiments to engage in something that was nourishing you. Um, and that there was this sense of community, like that there's more people in the room when nourishment is happening. Um, all of those experiences, there was more people that brought those stories alive, and there was food. What was in the fridge, Ashi? Was
Yeah,
it?
we always had like a Filipino egg rolls. They're called lumpia.
Lumpia. I wanted to, yes, what's in a lumpia?
So there's different kinds. There's like Shanghai style. There's my my one of my best friends, her mom does it with ground turkey, but you usually see like cabbage, carrots, maybe some fish sauce, annatto for color. Like people do them different ways, but you know, garlic powder and stuff like that. Hmm.
Stop it. Oh my
Hmm.
God. Mm. So, how have you received care from others? And offerings of wellness, and that's a perfect segue. The description of that food. How have we received care or offerings of wellness from other Black people or people of color in your life? Like, how do we enmesh in different relationships from the perspective of Black-bodied people and lean into others or have others lean into us? Um, Dewan, would you share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rashida. Yeah, I think my experience is probably atypical from the fact that I grew up in Alaska. My dad was Air Force, so was my mom for a little bit. So, we lived off the military installation, so I lived away from a lot of my close friends. And so my parents were predominantly like who were the ones who were around to offer me care and wellness, and what that looked like for them. And so, uh, traits that I carry on today, my parents wanted to prepare me for being Black in America. Like I think that looking back, that was abundantly clear, and especially based on their experiences. And so like I recall my childhood being built around resiliency and independence. Like those were two traits that that I felt that like I needed in order to succeed based on my parents' teachings and with the notion that like nothing will be given to you. And because of your skin color, unfortunately, you'll have to work twice as hard. And unfortunately, I don't believe them to have been wrong. Um, and to be quite honest, like it's taken counseling for me to like let my guard down and like unlearn some of the things that were brought to me as offerings of wellness. And I love my parents, and I appreciate their intentions, right? And just I don't know, I love this question because just reflecting on it, um, I don't think my parents realized like how much they were offering wellness to me and just modeling their behavior, right? Like my mom was in the military and she changed, she got out of the military, right? She was empowered and decided to do something different. My parents, my dad deciding to be stationed in Alaska, like we moved away from all our family. Um, and as far as seeing extended family, we only saw them like every 4 years. So I feel like when I look at back at my childhood and my parents, like they kind of did things their own way, which I don't think I could appreciate how empowering and positive that was to me. But it carries on to me today. Because, you know, in my small community, it's in Alaska, so there's not like, a ton of brown people. So it's a small community, but in my experiences, not just for my community, but also the culture was a lot more to do with what I should be and less about what I wanted to be, which is something I struggled with. Being a young Black man is thinking about all the things I should be doing. And to give examples of like what that looked like for me, was, unfortunately in school, I had been called like an Uncle Tom because I was well spoken and I was smart. The hard time I was given by my elders in the community because I didn't attend church regularly. Um, you know, the shock on my peers' faces when I tell them I don't smoke weed and I don't drink, right? Like those are things that I felt like things that like somebody would tell you like that's what Black people do, right? And it kind of felt this thing of like that's what I should be doing. And it took everything in me to follow and forge my own path. Um, and so really like I think this is an interesting question because I have received a lot of love and care, but what I learned is through counseling, I learned to form and establish better boundaries and a better relationship with myself. And I really learned that I needed to offer myself care and wellness before I could properly receive it from other people. And so really like my family and then primarily myself is the ways that I've been able to experience um, care and wellness in the Black community. And it's been really impactful.
Early on, you talked about working twice as hard. And I just saw in my mind's eye sort of that extension of hard work and how it's so hard to kind of quantify or describe that twice as hard, but it's there, and it's double the effort in all things. And so I felt all of the effort that you were sharing from all of the people, and that sometimes the best efforts can be helpful for the person giving them, but not necessarily for the person receiving them. Violet, what would you share about offerings of care and wellness?
Thank you. Yes, for me, my story is very much like Dewan's. He grew up in Alaska, and I grew up here in rural Clackamas County, you know, in the 60s and the 70s. So there weren't a lot of people who looked like me and or my family, but church was that steady space and place that my parents made sure we connected with regularly. And so I learned to read people at church and figure out who's real, who's not real. As an adult, I leaned into the role of a greeter at church. And for me, it just opened up everything. It just brought so much joy seeing people come into the space. Some people came in feeling really good, and they were able to transcend that feeling, those feelings to me. And others, you could tell it's like something's not quite right there. And I would then lean into their space a little more and say, pull them aside to try to figure out what was going on with them on that day. It's like, no, you're not really okay today. Come on, share what's going on. I can tell this Sister Larry you're talking to. And so to get them to open up and share their thoughts, feelings, and emotions allowed me to respond to their needs at that time, whether it was giving them an additional hug or or praying with them at that moment. In fact, just this last week in church, one of the members was, you could tell she, you know, she was okay. It's like, I'm doing good. And it's like, well, no, you're not really. And she leaned in a little closer and said, you know, I just need you to pray for me and my family. My daughter and her husband are going through some things, and I need you to pray. And I just grabbed her right then and prayed with her. And she said, thank you so much. I just needed that. I'm going up to Seattle to spend some time there, and I want to be able to engage them appropriately. Um, Another story that I was thinking about is like trying to reflect on how the greeting really helps me minister to others. When new faces come through, I always say, you know, what brought you here today? Why are you in Portland, Oregon at this time? And this particular Sabbath, there were two young ladies, and they said, oh, we're here for nursing school. And I said, oh, I'm a nurse. Yes. There's an automatic connection. You know, where do you go? And they attended Walla Walla School of Nursing. And one of my other gifts of connection is inviting people to my home. I enjoy cooking and baking and opening this space so people can connect with each other. And so I set up a time with them, you know, I'm going to have you over. Probably about 3 weeks later, another group of two young ladies come through, and it's like, what brings you here today? Oh, we're nursing students. We're roommates. We're at the University of Portland. It's like, okay, you mind sharing your information? I'm a nurse too. And so we connected. You know, I check in with them in school because I know how nursing school is being a nurse. And then I decided, okay, I need to have them all. They need to get together. And so I invited them all. And at church that particular week, two of them looked at each other and said, I know you. I I know you. One was from the University of Portland, one was from Walla Walla. These two went to high school together, were in the same senior class. And it just is, for me, it was like, yes, Yes, Violet, this is what you're supposed to do. It's not just about you sitting back and trying to glean, but it's about giving and in return, getting something else. So, so wellness for me is definitely about my church and being able to see and observe others and help make connections with them.
Tasha, you're welcome to join in.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Rashida. And Violet and Dewan, I hear the threads of connection across our stories. I also want to just thank Clackamas Community College and the Cougar Leadership Education and Advocacy for Progress Office for creating this space and inviting me to participate. I think similar to Dewan and Violet, in order for me to like answer this fully, I do want to give just like a little background information about me. And I am a biracial Black woman who was born and raised in Oregon. I'm originally from the eastern side of the state, but I've been living in the Portland metro area now for 12 or 13 years. And growing up in Eastern Oregon, there was not a lot of people who looked like me. I was the only Black woman in my graduating class, and that was for high school and college. But moving to Portland after college allowed me the opportunity to see more people who look like me. And as I've spent time on this side of the state, I've grown so much because I've been able to cultivate community and build relationships with other Black women and Black people and other people of color that has enriched my soul and has shown me what it means to receive care and receive wellness. And I think in particular, my current job, I am a part of the Black African and African American Employee Resource Group. And within that, I've also created a affinity space for the Black women within that group as well. And I've met so many people within that employee resource group who have supported me, supported each other, and it's a continual reminder for me of how important community is for my wellness, but also for Black wellness in general. Listening to and embracing the myriad of narratives within Black community has profoundly influenced my approach to wellness. And each of their stories, whether it's about overcoming adversity or celebrating cultural heritage and navigating our challenges that we experience in the different intersections of our identities, just adds layers of richness to our collective understanding of physical, mental, spiritual health and wellness.
Wow, I feel like I want to point out how each one of you shared so many layers of the question, from community to each other. But then there's this sensitivity to, okay, it's not just about me, it's about leaning into what others need and the ways that Black experience and the impact of white supremacy around it applies pressure, but in that pressure, sometimes there's this release of intuition and sensitivity and ability to be more present, more like I'm thinking of Violet's moment of saying, "Oh, you sounded fine, but you're not," or this community space at this space needs all of us together in our own room, like the sensitivity of leaning in, or this is helping you, mom and dad, but I need something else. Like I think that comes from, for at least I can relate to it through the depth of which I'm forced to be aware of multitudes in any space. So thank you all for that. And in that vein, you all already shared this, and we can just continue the sharing about unique ways that joy or wellness come into your life? And I use the word unique because there is this reality, right, in white supremacist perspective that Blackness comes in certain forms and packages. Even the artist we listened to at the top of the conversation, Yasmin Williams, that sound, she talks about how it's often people don't think that she's a Black woman when you listen to that kind of music. And so there's a perceived notion. Dewan, you shared all the details of how you were expected to show up with your peers or in religious spaces. So we are not often given the space to be nuanced and unique or quirky or whatever. And those descriptions are often afforded to people of the dominant culture. So I'm curious, and I'm actually gonna start with Dewan and then ask Violet to join afterwards. So Dewan, what are some of your unique ways of seeking joy or wellness in your life?
Yeah, thanks, Rashida. I'll just start with the overall theme of like for me, like wellness like is my purpose. Like that's kind of what gives me the joy is staying grounded in that. And in the hats that I wear as a husband, a father, and a friend, like those are very important to me. And I find the joy in trying to stay grounded in my purpose, which I define for myself as leading a life of love, gratitude, and acceptance in the service of myself and others. Like that's something I try to, whenever I feel like I'm kind of going off the beaten path, I try to ground myself to. Um, and in that vein, like I kind of like what I mentioned earlier with the previous answer, like my parents kind of doing things their way. It's kind of like I feel like it's in me to just I love being a cycle breaker. Like I want to make things better. I have a young daughter and she's my sole inspiration for like wanting to model the way for her. Um, and specifically like as I've grown in my career and really just for her and anyone in the community is that like success can look differently just like wellness can look differently and it doesn't have to look a certain way just like you mentioned Rashida, right? And so like I feel like currently I'm an IT director here at Clackamas Community College and I want to show my daughter and others that like you can be a Black IT director, you can wear a hoodie, you can have tattoos down your arm and be just as effective and qualified as someone in a suit and tie who went to an Ivy League school, right? So I really like that to the core of me is like really a mission of mine. I remember being, young in IT and like telling myself, like, I want people who look like me to be in boardrooms. I want people who look like me to, to be in these spaces of influence so I can help model the way and open paths for people who look like me, especially in tech. I mean, there's not a lot of women or people of color in IT. And so it's really a big passion of mine. And I find joy in trying to like break those barriers down. Um, so yeah, I mean, and that's a part of what I really enjoy. And other things that I do to seek joy and wellness are probably not typical of people with, people who look like me probably don't do, at least people don't think they do, is I love listening to podcasts. I get a lot of self-growth and self-improvement. Again, I mentioned I go to counseling. I'm probably 4 years ago, I would have, like a lot of Black men, I just would have thought I don't need it. And so I really encourage, anybody, especially Black men, to go to counseling. It's really, I've really enjoyed it. And also just learning from others. And so, for example, like sometimes at night, my wife and my daughter are in bed, like I'll just sit in our family room, and just experience stillness, no TV, no music, just like me and like my thoughts, which can be a dangerous place sometimes. But like, and so I just let things come up to the surface. And sometimes, like sometimes I even have a good cry. Like sometimes, like the pain, the things that we kind of suppress or just act like don't bother us, they come up to the surface. And sometimes, you just have a good cry, which also I want to encourage. Like I really appreciate Ashi you mentioning how Rashida's poem made you cry because I want more of that, right? Like boys can cry too, especially Black men. It's okay, we can cry. Um, and so yeah, it makes me feel lighter, and I enjoy doing the work. And yeah, really. So yeah, I just self-improvement is how I seek joy and wellness. I really enjoy the experience. And I get an immense amount of joy like working to be better for myself and the ones I love.
Ah, I love that. Oh my goodness. I love that part of your joy is just loving people up into their leadership in any way they want to see themselves grow. What a way to experience joy. Violet, would you jump in?
Sure. Yes. Joy. Wow. I love this question because it makes me or allows me to reflect on my upbringing and what I was privileged to experience, not knowing it was a privilege. Um, Growing up in rural Clackamas County and having a brother who loved horses and parents who supported that, and being able to, from a young child, go to rodeos and horse shows. And, we were the only ones out there, and it wasn't um, always positive, especially for my brother and his horse, because white folks didn't expect for blacks to be out there and can be at the Clackamas County Fair showing their horse and actually winning champion and grand champion and moving on to the state. So he had to experience a lot of negativity going through that, but our parents continue to push us in whatever activities we enjoyed. And they, yeah, they showed us so many different ways to experience joy beyond the traditional Black ways, which also leads to problems within the Black community because then you're viewed as you're trying to be better than us. And it's like, no, we're not. Um, these experiences are for all. So I remember, going to the opera, Leontine Price. My mom exposed me to that as a young child, well, probably teenagers. Um, the opera, the symphony, plays, Broadway shows, they didn't limit what the world limited. And I encourage everyone to follow your passions, your dreams. What makes you happy may not make the person next to you happy, but you need to go ahead and try it to see if it makes you happy. Um, Exposing my children to skiing and snowboarding. Um, I remember when my boys were 10 and 12 and 13, and they were skateboarders. It was just an activity they liked. Not that they didn't do basketball and football and all those other sports, but they did skateboarding when skateboarding wasn't cool for Blacks to do. And they were told, you're trying to be right. Oh, that's a white sport. But we continue to encourage them and push them to do the things that they enjoy doing, which in turn brings us as parents and grandparents joy watching them shine in whatever it is that they were doing. So just keep doing the things that you like to do. It doesn't matter what kind of music it is. If it's what you like, listen to it. If it's your type of a book to read, read it. Don't let the walls of society pin you in to what they think you're supposed to be and or not be.
Wow. I can feel the history of Clackamas can be. I mean, what you shared just spans so much for this area that this college is located in. Um, and so much richness of this discussion. Thank you all for being a part of it. One thing that you mentioned about your brother's success at the rodeo is reminding me of what Dewan talked about in that regard of twice as hard, because it's hard enough to win with your horse in this stage, in this platform. But then you mentioned that he was attacked. He was energetically not welcome to succeed in the space because white people didn't expect to see you participate, let alone excel and win. And if that same success had happened in the white community, then people surround you and you're awarded and there's a celebration. And so that twice as hard of winning, doing the hard thing already to win the actual competition, but then the whole time you've been filtering through this pressure, this pressure. And so when we think about what we need to feel wellness in predominantly white spaces, what boundaries do you have and how do you apply them? Tasha, can you jump in?
Oh, thank you, Rashida. Well, as I mentioned, I am from Eastern Oregon, and I have been in predominantly white spaces for the majority of my life. When I was younger, it didn't feel safe to maybe talk about race or press back on ignorance or racism. And I recognize now, I think reflecting on that time, that I was not well back then. And now, as I've gotten older and sought out mental health support and settled into my identity and who I am as a person, beyond just I think the color of my skin, but I've come to be more comfortable with leaning into that discomfort and speaking out against oppression. And for my own wellness, I'm always trying to protect my peace, and I think that's part of my boundary, is that I try to come from a place of curiosity if possible and understand everyone's perspective, as like we have no idea what path someone has walked or what they are carrying. But if it's evident that it's not going to be a constructive conversation, and that it's just going to end up causing me more harm, then I choose in that moment to protect myself and to protect my peace. And I will express how I feel within that moment and make that clear, but then being able to halt or step away from that discussion. And that can be physically leaving the space and not allowing myself to continue to experience that harm, or that's not a possibility. It's turning off my camera and kind of stepping virtually away from that conversation and making it known that I'm not comfortable with continuing with that discussion. And I do encourage others to do the same, but it's not an easy thing to do. I know when you're faced with ignorant comments or microaggressions or oppression, I've had family members say things to me or other people of color, or about other people of color, that I immediately have a reaction to, and my hurt and anger clouds my ability to come from that place of curiosity. And it's a constant way of being for me to be able to protect my peace and health and well-being within all spaces. And I want others to advocate for their own peace as well. And I kept coming back to that community thread kind of throughout. I think a lot of my answers is being in community and feeling supported in and out of those spaces helps a great deal. Community connections are the backbone of wellness in my eyes, and they provide that support network that is crucial for collective healing from harm in these predominantly white spaces.
All the wisdom. Everybody knows so much about you guys just know so much. Ashi, would you jump in?
Absolutely. This question about boundaries, yeah, it becomes really important for us, definitely in predominantly white spaces. So as an artist, like having to or choosing to, or like performing in spaces, performing for audiences that might be predominantly white has been interesting. And last year I completed a 6-month dance residency. And throughout the process of creating the work, I definitely went through like questions around like, as like a pleaser or like caretaker, like, oh, do I protect the audience? Do I protect my audience? Like, is this too much? Right? Because like what I was attempting to do is like tell like part of like a big story that's like very personal, that has like there's like somatic tendrils, like telling it is very like can be very intense, and emotional. So I'm like, oh, you know, do I protect them? Is this too much? Like, do I do I need to like do they need to like sign a waiver? I'm agreeing to like be subjected to your like emotional states or something. I'm like these are the like the questions I was having. And ultimately I, counseled with my people, like with my mentors, fellow artists and cohort and stuff like that. And I realized that like the boundary for me was that like I get to like unapologetically present myself and my grief and my ritual and my emotions. Like an audience member is already agreeing to this space, and I get to like um, give them permission to hold space for me, basically, and just unapologetically just like tell my story and and they like so I did and like I didn't hold back. My I let I had my supportive like my two like musicians playing the music that I composed. I stacked the deck for myself so that I could authentically give what I had to give and be like, no, kind of with this energy of like, no, you get to hold space for me right now, you know? And like this is I'm appreciative. You get to, witness me and my ceremony. And this is yours too. And like I had so that reciprocity, it felt like was accessed there. And I had people coming up to me, again, largely white folks, like coming up to me, like other artists or whatnot, like we're respecting and appreciating that space of holding grief. Um, and it's like, yeah, I'm not going to protect you from these feelings that you need to experience. Like you need to see like the full force of like my rage, my joy, my humility, like all the things that, and intensity. So um yeah, so kind of experiencing like the fluidity of boundaries there, and also like kind of the ferocity of compassion.
Mm, Ashi and Tasha, both of you, um, again, back to that nuance of emotional maturity to keep locating your peace, keep locating what you need in the moment, and turning towards that. Um, Erica, what about you?
Wow. Um, Tough to follow. I guess I feel like I need to share a little bit of context too, because I have mostly navigated predominantly white spaces. I'm also biracial. I grew up not in Oregon, but in Redondo Beach, California, which was pretty white. Um, Only Black girl in school. I spent some time in Hawaii before moving here to Oregon, but I've been here almost 19 years and have worked and gone to school in predominantly white spaces. Um, and uh, Something that Tasha shared just about this idea of like moving more towards more profound mental health and like really owning my identity. I feel like that intersection really started to happen maybe about 8 years ago, but really kind of culminated right around 2020. It was like just an interesting intersection of factors, but I was really starting to lean into my own sort of like spiritual or wellness practices, and also having this like crisis that I no longer wanted there to be sort of my personal identity and my professional identity. I needed to find a way for those to marry. And that was definitely sort of kicked off by the events that unfolded after the murder of George Floyd. Um, and so I started to recognize this. I love the word audacity building inside me of like, yes, I'm just going to show up as my whole self. I'm no longer going to code switch. I'm going to bring all of myself. And around that time, I discovered a quote by Audre Lorde that says, you know, caring for myself is not self-indulgent. Um, and it's sort of an act of resistance, right? And so I really started to think about, like, what would prioritizing my self-care look like within spaces that really didn't have my care in mind? And what does that look like? And so it definitely feels like protecting my energy and honoring my needs and sort of refusing to shrink or be small. Um, and so when I think about boundaries, um, you know, I do some spiritual work specifically around protecting my boundaries. So literally like clearing off energy that is not mine, drawing back my own energy. I do that on a regular basis just to be really mindful because it's so easy to absorb what other people are sort of putting off. And I pay close attention to how that feels in my body because it often feels like that tightness in my chest, or you know, you can just feel that tension building. I have to stop and think about like what's happening here, and often it's taking on other people's sort of energetic um, garbage, I might say. And then just you know, emotional boundaries too, like making sure that I'm taking care of myself. I'm not taking on what is other people's work to do for themselves, you know, especially around, um, you know, justice work, and that can get really complicated. And finally, like protecting my time, like learning how to say no was probably one of the biggest gifts that I received, you know, especially during a time where people were coming out of the woodwork asking you to do all sorts of things because they wanted a black or brown face at the, you know, forefront. It's just learning to say thank you so much for thinking of me, but you know, I'm not available. I think that that's also been a really important piece of like, I love what Tasha said, protecting my peace, you know, protecting my well-being, and just recognizing what's my work to do and what's not my work to do. I think has really been vitally important.
I love how closely connected all of the stories have been, but then also how intensely different in terms of your access points for joy and wellness and peace. Wow. I mean, I'm thinking about this idea of caring for yourself, how you said it, Erica, in spaces that don't have your care in mind. Um, Wow. I mean, I'm impressed at your ability to describe it because it's also my day to day. And even this word of care, I mean, you all participated in such a special experience by creating Black Care Matters, a podcast where you shared your stories, you all as in Violet and Erica. I think Dewan likes podcasts. Black Care Matters. Hear more about Violet's story, hear more about Erica's story. But that work of caring when your care is not in mind, that I just feel so tenderly connected to right now. Um, how unfortunate and powerfully unfair it is to have to notice that about a space when so many others are there to be cared for, that it takes an audacity to ask for your care instead of just be able to be privileged to expect it at all times, that there's an interruption of that expectation required just to notice ourselves in this space and then to turn towards our own needs. This is the work. This is the twice as hard. How do we inspire ourselves when the demand on our beings, our efforts, our talents, our truth is constantly up against that pressure, that we turn towards someone else's safety, protect them from their own work, as Ashi was saying? This is not mine to carry. It's your turn. How do we inspire ourselves? And I love moving into this last part of this rich and powerful conversation you have all blessed every community member with. Right on the back of Erica talking about peace and Tasha talking about peace, Duan, would you share your source of inspiration that keeps you moving towards your own personal Black wellness?
Yeah. I just want to say like that last question was, yeah, it was great. Like, yeah, Tasha, Erica, Ashi, like the talk about peace. Like that's my biggest thing. I wanted to like jump through the screen. I got so excited. Because like, because it just flows right into my answer. And that's that like there's a quote that I recently began leaning into, from Paulo Coelho. He wrote on Twitter, I guess now called X, that like if it costs you your peace, it's too expensive. And like and then just so all the peace talk has just been great talking about protecting your peace is something I'm really passionate about. And it resonated with me because like, boundary setting has been a huge part of like what wellness looks like for me. And I spent, the last 2 years working on trusting myself and loving myself and protecting my peace, right? I think protecting my peace has been one of the greatest gifts that I could give myself. Um, Another thing I love about this quote is that it reminds me, and it should remind us of like how much agency we have in our own lives, and that like we don't have to allow ourselves to remain at war and in chaos internally. Like we have things we can do. We can lean into wellness and community. And honestly, if something's seen as like too expensive, then you just need to move differently, right? You got to pivot. There's no reason to keep trudging forward. Like you can seek peace. And so like that's something that's really big for me and what inspires, wellness for me. And I just want to encourage anybody listening that like, especially those in the Black community, like to continue discovering like your confidence, to continue discovering your light, and like don't let anyone like diminish what makes you you. Like don't let them strip that away. I've had my struggles with that, and ultimately like if you're on a path that no longer aligns with what you value, then just trust yourself to change course. Like trust it. Like if it's in there, like just trust me, it's right. Just believe in yourself. Um, a question, like one of the best questions I've ever been asked in a professional setting is, I was at my previous employer, having some problems with management and just disagreeing and trying to figure out how to navigate that space that was predominantly white. And our HR business partner asked me like, do you feel like the company is asking you to be someone you're not? I love the question. And at the time, I told her that I didn't, but when they started to, I would leave. And I kept that promise. And so because I truly believe that being a culture add is more important than being a culture fit. Um, and so oftentimes, when I walk into a space of faces that don't look like mine and I'm applying for a job, they want a culture fit. Well, I'm not the culture, right? And so like we need to look at culture ads, and and honestly like it's not worth losing yourself, right? And so if the cost is losing yourself, in order to gain approval or praise, then for me like that's just simply too high a price to pay. And so I think often people don't value inner peace enough, and we put ourselves through a lot of unnecessary suffering. And I mean, I know I definitely did. I had my fair share. And so, yeah, I just want to encourage people to not do that, to continue to evaluate what peace is, and if it's starting to cost your peace, to understand that it's too expensive. And yeah, like I love the peace talk. It's been great. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Devon. Thank you for everything you contributed to this conversation. A culture add, not a culture fit. I'll never forget that for the rest of my life. Thank you for that. Ashi, would you like to jump in about your source of inspiration and Black wellness?
Yeah, I'm inspired by Dewan right now. Thank you for that. Yeah, there was a lot of really beautiful gems, and by everyone on this panel. Like I'm really inspired in this moment and for being a part of this. Gratitude again to everyone. Um, I did. I referenced an album that has really spoken to me in the past few years. It's by the singer R&B singer Cleo Soul, and the album's called Mother. The album's been really grounding for me themes of course, motherhood, family, relationships, faith in God, um, and just positivity. Uh, the album has really helped me like grieve in a really beautiful way. I've wanted to be a father since like 2015. And went through this whole, I was a nanny for many years and went through this whole like fatherhood journey. Rashida and I used to be nannies together. We'd meet up with our respective nanny children, white children, and then we'd be like, oh, our white babies. We had this whole running joke. But yeah, so, and I almost did become a father several years ago and ultimately did not. So, um, and it's been a few years of healing and ceremony and things like that, but having to kind of like let go of certain attachments of expectations of how it might look, having to grieve the loss of the child and kind of relook at myself and find out what's in me and like what am I carrying. And there's so many quotes on these songs. I encourage everyone to take time to listen, but there's a song called 23, and she says, the little stars and the locked up dreams, the missing pieces, they're in me. And so there's something in that about um like the dreams that I have and the hopes and the dreams, like something about like feeling like they could be like lost in this world, but that I have everything I need. All my dreams are like securely tucked into my heart, into my body, into like the way that I move through the world. Um, there's this connection to like motherhood and creativity and to the land that I really resonate with. Um, like, I like exercise my like womb envy when I like cultivate in the earth and like dig in my fingers into the earth and like, create like grow seeds, grow seedlings. Like I feel into my own motherhood, into my own like internal like spiritual womb energy. Um, so there's a lot there, but yeah, there's a lot of inspiration. But that album is like kind of a breadcrumb for me to kind of tap back into all that internal like inspiration and driving force, and sharing it with you all like draws this thread where I can like retouch back on the threads of inspiration that you've given me today. So thank you for connecting it all together, for all this Black wellness we're getting to experience together.
Man, I had no idea the depth of Black wellness that was upon us. It's so wonderful. And yes, having friendship for multiple decades with you, Ashi, and in our 20s, having shared so many moments of sharing what our dreams were and what we wanted for ourselves, even in caring for other people. Like, you are a part of my community. And I love that I've got to meet new community with all of you. Um, I feel so grateful. Um, Tasha, what about you?
Thank you. This has been such a wonderful and powerful experience for me as well, Rashida. And I am going to go a bit rogue. I know you suggested I talk about something, and I'm going to talk about something else that's inspirational for me. Just given the conversation, it's kind of like sparked something else in my mind that I want to make sure to highlight. And I know this may kind of be shared out in some resources, but CC Clackamas Community College's own Casey Layton, I would like to highlight as someone that's inspirational and continues to be an inspiration. I know she's going to love me talking about this too. But she and I met a little over 5 years ago, right before the pandemic and the lockdown had started. And I was living alone and struggling with my physical and mental health during that time, and having her support then was like instrumental in my survival during that time in general, really. But her wisdom and leadership um, that supported my overall wellness was really a turning point for me, and has continued to be a turning point for me over these last 5 years. She had shared a practice with me early on in our relationship that I still carry with me to this day. And within that practice, when you're making a choice, or a choice needs to be made, to pause and reflect on if my choice or your choice will be moving you closer to wellness, and whether that's health or peace or connection, or will that choice be moving you closer to illness? And that could be anger or disconnection. And even that practice of the pause and reflection has been very helpful. But the awareness about what wellness versus illness means for me within my choices has been such a powerful practice to instill within my professional and personal life. And Casey is also one of the co-founders of another like biracial support group that I'm a part of, and she was the inspiration for me creating that affinity space, which she doesn't know that I mentioned about Black women within my employee resource group. And the experiences that I've had, and the lessons that I've learned through her and through the other Black women and Black people and community that I'm a part of, have been instrumental in kind of turning a page in my life and showing me the power of collective healing, and the importance of creating spaces that validate and celebrate Black identity.
Yes, I love that. The power of one person to come in and be an absolute game changer. The gifts that you share when you're that open to supporting and being in community with others. The way that changes how the other person thinks about wellness in their own space because you existed. So powerful to recognize that. So I'm so glad, especially in this community, that you decided to share the rich and joyous gift that you took in by being open to be in community with Casey. Yeah, so many different pictures of inspiration. Erica, what's yours?
I echo what Ashi said. I'm inspired by all of you, and I'm so grateful to be in this space. Um, uh, I'm gonna go in a slightly different direction, which is I'm so invested in the idea of collective healing. Um, but over the last few years, I've been on a pretty significant grief journey after losing my brother at the end of 2022. And I found that journey to feel really isolating. And so even though I was surrounded by community, it just didn't feel like I could get what I needed there. And so I had been doing a lot of work around like becoming resourced. I used to call it, or still call it, like lining your nest, of like thinking about what sort of internal and external resources can you pull together to support yourself and rely upon. Um, and when I'm in a place of like moving towards wellness, and it's oftentimes like reminding myself during periods of overwhelm, whether it's, emotional overwhelm with grief or it's stress overwhelm with work, of what I have access to. Um, and oftentimes I find that having access to the natural world is what really supports and inspires me. I appreciate what Ashi was talking about with connectivity to the land, because sometimes it's as simple as getting my feet on the soil, or being close to a tree to actually um, sort of release what's overwhelming, right? To allow that to be composted into the earth, into the roots, like let go. It's sort of, I think, the same ideas, let go, let God, but this is my spiritual practice just around this is too heavy for me. I can't hold this any longer. And so having some place to sort of let it go, but then also a place to draw nourishment from, um, is often what I go to. And like, for example, water is sort of equated to our emotional bodies, right? And, you think of tears and grief, like, I've had experience in water in really trying to release grief. Um, and the experience of just like floating in a body of water and crying at the same time was like one of the most powerful things I'd ever experienced. And I felt not only like it was like the collective grief of like everyone who had ever grieved, in that body of water at that time. And I felt that incredible sense of release, but also just being physically held by the water was really moving. And so I remind myself of that. It can be as simple as walking outside and sticking my feet in my own yard, or it can be out in some beautiful place, here in the Pacific Northwest that we have so much access to. But I feel like, the earth, the trees, the water have so much to offer us in terms of healing and wellness and support. Um, and it's hopefully available to all of us in some small way. So that's where I get my inspiration from.
Oh, I love the crying underwater. I love that. And it reminds me of a poem I wrote, and it reminds me of trying to describe exactly what you just did. Um, to be held from that many angles, impermeable. Um, so beautiful. Thank you, Erica, for being part of this discussion. Violet, welcome to bringing your inspiration
Yeah.
and helping us wrap up this conversation.
Yeah, this has been truly amazing for me, and I hope for all of the participants listening. I've gleaned so much. When I retired almost 2 years ago, I received the book Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey, and it just allowed me to reflect on how far I've gotten away from rest and how easy it is to get away from rest, but how our parents and grandparents used to take the time to rest. And I remembered, it just came to me today that I would pull on my dad. It's like, come on and play, Dad. Come on, come on. Let's go outside. And he would just be sitting there and he would say, I'm just resting my eyes. Give me a moment. I'm just resting my eyes. And that was his way of refueling. My grandmother used to say that I'm just resting my eyes, and it was their way of refueling. We have to take the time to stop, refuel, so we can give some more. And I just, there were so many good nuggets from this book. I encourage all of you to read it, but I want to end with reading a little paragraph, and I hope it will inspire us all as we continue on that journey and path of wellness. Um, the possibilities are endless and infinite. Rest looks like tapping in and listening to what your body and soul want. It's extra time while bathing, even an extra 10 minutes of concentrated silence. Rest is taking a leisurely walk and dancing. Rest is a tea ritual allowing you to meditate while breathing in each warm sip. Rest is not returning an email immediately and maintaining healthy boundaries. Rest is honoring the boundaries of those you engage with. Rejecting urgency. Rest is detoxing from social media. Rest is listening and healing from individual trauma. Rest is journaling so you can be a witness to your own inner knowing without the energy of others. Rest uplifts and boosts our spirit, allowing us to know that we are enough and the care of our souls deserves a role in our healing plans. So I encourage you all to take that time to rest, which doesn't have to mean laying down, taking a 5-hour nap, but just having the time to clear your brain, your mind, so you can fill it back up with positive things that will allow you to continue growing in your journey.
What a wonderful reminder. It's like Shavasana at the end of a yoga, at the end of a yoga class. Wow, just yes, lying in that. You all, what a absolutely magnificent time together. Um, this is punctuating the end of a 6-month period of which I've been at Clackamas Community College. So I want to once again thank Casey for inviting me to be a part of this. Um, it has been so powerful to end with this particular experience. Um, Thank you to Dewan, to Violet, to Erica, Tasha, Ashi. All of you went above and beyond in your generous sharing of what it means to you to experience wellness in your bodies and in your minds and in your hearts. And I'm so grateful. Um, and for those of us that are in communities supporting from other cultures, I just want to celebrate the gift this kind of sharing offers, this kind of raw and honest and permeable and nuanced sharing. What an opportunity to receive all of these rich nuggets of how to better hold the space so people in this discussion can feel wellness and joy and all of the special and unique ways that they get to be an add, not a fit. What an opportunity to welcome those additions to the space, to the community, to the city, to the boardroom, to all of the leadership elements that we get to engage in. What an immense gift we've cultivated here to richen that ability to grow. We are multitudes. I personally feel like I have flourished in this conversation. So mission accomplished once again, voting for everyone Black. You guys did it. You win. You're amazing. Yes. The award goes to, this was dope. Thank you so much. Thank you.